Welcome to A Call to Healing. I'm your host, Melanie McDaniel. Each week, we explore new healing modalities, products, and practices to support the mind, body, and spirit. Today's guest is Miguel the Gnome, ethnobotanist, medicine maker, felt artisan, and self-identified gnome, whose life weaves together sacred plants, including full-spectrum cannabis and CBD and ceremonial cacao. A Call to Healing is sponsored by Senavida, a platform helping practitioners spend more time in service and less time in the back office. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce Miguel the Gnome, and we'll talk about what that means to the podcast. Thank you so much for being on A Call to Healing, Miguel.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. Really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
of course. I'm going to give a little backstory about how we met, then I want to hear your story. So I think it was a Facebook group, and you had posted something about offering a free cookie. You make CBD cookies, which we'll get into what CBD is. And I said yes. And that's kind of how this friendship and knowing you started, which I think it's been a couple years now.
Yep. Yep. It's been at least 3 years.
Oh, has it? 3 years since
Yeah.
I've known you? It
Yeah.
might have been, yeah. So who's Miguel? What's your story up till now?
So the story of Miguel the Gnome is originally I'm from Texas and I went to school in New York. I went to Columbia University and I studied neuropharmacology and ethnobotany, which in layman's terms means I was looking at the uses of psychedelics, particularly in indigenous and non-indigenous communities, and looking at the effects of globalization on various forms of religious practices. I, for a long time, had a deep fascination with religion, starting to do my own research at about 13 when I ultimately started my dreadlocks, and also had a fascination very early on with cannabis and with psychedelics as a whole. So when I went to school, I realized that I could actually study both academically and be considered somewhat of a legitimate researcher, taking two things that I just really enjoyed and like, cool, I could actually be something like, and there's actually a whole bunch of people that are studying these kinds of things. So, okay, this is great. Um, the New York scene, the Ivy League scene, was a little challenging for somebody that was way more connected to the earth than the majority of the people that were around me. It was very hard to be in a concrete jungle, though very, very helpful in many regards to being exposed to new things. Um, but I recognized at a certain point that I had to get out, and it was either quit school that I'd gotten this scholarship for, or um, go somewhere else. And what most called to me was actually a study abroad program. Just so happened to be in Peru um, for the exploration of globalization on indigenous practices. And so it was absolutely perfect, as I had been deeply called to medicine music for many years, and the group that I had been following was actually in Peru. I didn't actually know really where, but I just knew that they were in Peru. So I designed a whole research proposal to go and study ayahuasca, San Pedro, and mushrooms, and the religious context around them, and how those were changing as globalization was bringing more tourism to ultimately the Sacred Valley around Cusco. And so that was my out. I had an out. I had a way of going away. Basically, my scholarship was paying for all of it, and I was now exactly where I wanted to be. So, started my backpacking journey. Really, at that point, I'd done a little bit in the States, and at that point, I was ready to go. So, I left a few months before the program in January. Made my way down to Peru little bit by little bit by late February, and started this amazing program. And while I was there, that is when I became a gnome. That's when I fully recognized gnome. I was sitting in the Sacred Valley, sitting amongst a bunch of beautiful marigolds, and um, I was looking up at the mountains and realized that there was some little voice kind of speaking in my head, that something about being one of us. And I was like, I have no idea what is happening right now. I didn't
One
grow up
person?
with yeah, I was like, am I, this is residuals of something, like, because I didn't grow up with magic, really. I grew up with Harry Potter, but like never with gnomes or elves or anything like that. Like that was not really part of my adolescence. So um, when I started to recognize what was happening, it all kind of dawned on me, like, these are the little creatures, these are the little magical entities that we call gnomes, but we can call them all kinds of things. And in this particular case, like I fully identify with everything that is a gnome for me, that is a creator and a medicine man, a medicine creature of the earth that brings forth nourishment, brings forth crafts, brings forth lessons of the earth. And so I identified with that. And it's, wow, that was back in 2013. So it's been a little minute of self identifying as a gnome, and people really didn't understand it initially. I didn't fully understand it initially. Um, but it's clicked and has inspired almost the last 20 years of my life. So from there, after studying beautiful medicine work, beautiful people in Peru, I brought back that awareness and knowledge to New York, and ultimately realized that I needed to get out of the city. And I started traveling across the country in a 1966 Volvo that I ultimately ended up being gifted. Me and a partner at the time began traveling around in this beautiful Volvo, meeting all kinds of people and really expanding how we were connecting with the world. At that point is when I started making these hats. These are felted gnome hats. Initially, I started making them myself, and then realized that people in Peru could make them a lot better. And so started working with gnome hats, started really flaring them up, designing them, and traveling around and selling hats, jewelry, and other magical things. And that brought us back over to Austin, where I based myself quite a bit. After Austin, there was potential to move out to California and go and start an experience trimming with cannabis, and getting to be involved very deeply and intimately with a very close friend and a farm that he was creating. So we followed the call and made our way out to California. We left our 66 back in Austin, bought a new car, and traveled out to California. And once out in California, that's really where so much more magic started to become real and accessible. As this farm was a full biodynamic farm, it was inspired by a friend of mine named Mike, and it was where I ended up living for the next 8 years. Really got very involved in textiles and herbs and food, and started to recognize that there's actually this beautiful synergy between all of them, as sometimes the exact thing that you can make color from, you can actually eat, and then you can actually also use as medicine. Um, so at that point, yeah, I was in heaven. Like, I'm in Mendocino County at the time. Beautiful space. It has everything. I mean, you can do almost anything. It has almost everything that you could possibly want. I mean, from a homesteading perspective, we were entirely off grid. From a homesteading perspective, it's fascinating. It's perfect. Other than the fires, which you can totally build your space to not catch on fire. Most people don't. Um, so if you do follow the proper practices, then you can have a beautiful space that can be safe and magical almost all year round. So yeah, in Northern California, learned a whole bunch. And at that point, I started to really grow my brand and grow multiple brands. One of them is called Om Gnomes. This is my textile and superfood as well as super herb company. I manufacture all kinds of magical medicines and cozy, yummy things. And um, we also support other companies across the country in manufacturing their products and white labeling them. So you can find products that have come from the hands of myself and my team across the country with somebody else's label on them as well. Uh, my goal there is to revolutionize how we nourish ourselves. And that can look like the things that we put on our body or the things that we put inside our body. And then I started another company at the same time called the Enchanted Waffle and Elixirs. Mm-hmm. This was my what I called a food theater. And I recognized after several years of living in Mendocino County that it was very challenging for a farmer to actually grow a quality product and sell it at a quality price to people, just because access was not always the easiest. And not everybody understood, like, why should I spend a little bit more on this when I can just go to Safeway and buy it at this? And so I recognized that I had this magical waffle recipe that I had been playing with for many years, and gluten-free, all organic, vegan, heady, great, yummy, scrumptious waffles. And I thought to myself, after an ayahuasca experience, why not create this magical food theater where we can bring people to us? If we build the temple, they will come. There's something really, really potent here. So I'd been making all these things, and I was growing all these things and making all these medicines, and recognized, okay, well, here's this moment to bring in not only everything that I'm producing, but everything that the people around me are producing, and we can help improve the overall experience around food and medicine. Not just making the medicine and providing that as an opportunity, but giving people a reason to be able to understand how to actually use this. And so this was for me like an amazing outlet to teach people about cannabis and about CBD, because at the time, living in California, cannabis was everywhere, and some people were like, "Yay!" and some people were like, like I don't want anything to do with this. Like I got high once, and I'm good. Like I don't, And so I was in a very interesting environment where, like, I mean, we were growing thousands of pounds of cannabis, and everybody around us was growing hundreds of thousands of pounds, and it was everywhere. But people didn't understand what the difference was between THC and CBD. Mm-hmm. And so some of these products that I was making, one of my initial products was a CBD honey. I recognized that people didn't actually understand like how to use it, which was a little strange, because it was like there's CBD in there. You take a spoon, you, like, mix it into some hot water, like CBD honey. Like it's not really all that challenging, but people were scared and people were uneducated, and they wanted access to healthy, good, yummy things for themselves. But there was this like lack in education that was extremely, extremely present, even amongst people that were like in a farming rural environment. I mean, maybe that's obvious, but for me, it was kind of strange because some of these people were farmers and some of these people were like involved in the food industry and still didn't understand the difference and what a full spectrum CBD was versus like just straight like high THC flower, and what different kinds of THC were, and all these kinds of things that seemed really obvious to me initially, but then I recognized like actually there's something here. There's something here that I can help with.
Yeah, I want to go into that because my first interaction with you with the cookie, I don't even remember why I initially am like, I want to try that. Maybe I had come across a CBD, but I learned a lot from you sitting on that couch. What are the healing properties of CBD? What is the difference between what are these things? What's the answer here? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people that are as confused as I was when I started, and honestly, still a bit confused. I still don't know everything about CBD and THC. So if you
Yeah,
want to
no,
tell us.
that it's an amazing, super complicated thing that unfortunately has been entirely illustrated and articulated by like the black market. And unfortunately, everybody got raised in prohibition, and so we don't get to like learn a lot of things, and a lot of this knowledge is entirely gate kept, and it's very challenging to understand. So basically, the cannabis plant, which is both like marijuana and hemp, um, it's just a legal definition that makes one the other. But like, if we want to just get beyond that, we say cannabis, and so cannabis can have um, lots of different compounds in there. The majority of the plant is broken up into two different ones, primarily THC and CBD.
Mhm.
Um, there are definitions of, we start to think about ratios of how much THC there is to CBD, and that kind of determines what the effect is ultimately whenever you consume that cannabis. That cannabis can look like a flower, can look like an extract, can look like an edible, whatever that looks like. But the ratio is super important to understand kind of like what we're dealing with.
Mhm.
Now, there are tons of different kinds of THC that exist in cannabis. There are tons of different kinds of CBDs that exist in cannabis. But if you want to think about them on an umbrella level, THC, CBD, one of them is a little bit more psychoactive, THC.
Mhm.
CBD is going to be a little bit more physically calming and emotionally calming, less psychoactive, though depending on that ratio that you are getting to consume, you can reach different levels of somewhere in between those.
Mhm.
Um, when it comes to THC, THC is a very funny topic because lots of people think they know things because of the black market, and unfortunately, we got like really like lied to, or lots of information didn't really get shared with us by like dealers and things of that sort because nobody really knew.
Mhm.
Um, there are two kinds of THC that I primarily work with. One of them is what is considered traditional THC, Delta 9 THC. Delta 9 has always been the prefix to this particular kind of THC. So, as the hemp market has been able to share many more varieties of THC, and people are starting to see Delta 9 appearing on their hemp products and are either hesitant or a big yay towards, it's the THC that we've always known. It's extracted in a particular way from what is called hemp. Um, but it's the same. It's the same. It's the same. There is literally no difference from it. If you like a product or don't like a product, it's because of everything else that goes into it. But it's not particularly because it's a Delta 9 experience or a Delta 9 product. It's because either that gummy is made with terrible ingredients, or that extract was produced terribly, or there's just bad energy and bad juju from like who made it or where you bought it. The other kind of THC that I work with is called Delta 8. Um, that got really, really popular because um, unlike Delta 9, there are no like limits on how much you can put into something federally. And so it was very, very popular there for a little bit. I am still a big fan of it and still utilize it within my products because I believe that from a health and wellness perspective, it's extremely calming. It's really helpful to get to sleep. When I'm not feeling good and I get sick, that's what I go to because it really puts me into my body.
Are these
Um,
THCs or CBDs that you're talking about? The Delta 8 and
th-
9. This
these are THCs. These are two of the most popular THCs that you'll see out there on the market.
so
Lots of
both
people
psychoactive.
have, yeah, they're both psychoactive.
Okay.
And now I primarily do not ever just do THC. For me, it is incredibly important to have what is called a full entourage experience,
Mhm.
which means I want to have my THC with some CBD and any of the other cannabinoids that you can give me. Because having what is called a full entourage experience allows for your body to better process the overall, what I consider medicine, the overall experience. You're able to drop in with it deeper. And these other cannabinoids alongside THC have a better health and wellness um, opportunity for the consumer. Um,
And I feel like
and
the cookies I got from you were way more CBD and not psychoactive at all. So, like,
yep,
what was that? How
yep,
much?
yep. So when we think about what is CBD, so CBD is, um, think of it as a supplement.
Mhm.
It's something that's super easy to consume. Um, One would, if it is a quality CBD, experience a nice little smile on your face, like when somebody comes up behind you and gives you like a really good like bear hug that you want to give you a hug, and you get that little smile on your face, and you're just like, yeah, that's what really good CBD does. And now CBD alone in an isolate form is ineffective, basically.
Hmm.
It really doesn't work. You need a lot of it, and you don't ultimately get that nice little smile. It just it does a thing, but does it really do the full thing? Not really. Not really. So, how do you get CBD to actually do the thing? Well, you actually have a little bit of THC involved in that process, and that is called a full spectrum CBD product. Full spectrum means that there are other cannabinoids, including THC, in with the CBD to create the most whole plant product,
Okay.
whether that be flour, whether that be an extract, or anything that you make thereafter. So my CBD cookies, they're scrumptious. And they are a beautiful interaction of multiple different things. On the cannabis side, they are full spectrum. 25 milligrams of CBD, 1 milligram of THC.
Yeah, I remember it being very small. I didn't feel any sort of psychoactive. Just I used them to sleep. That's initially why I
And
got them is to go to sleep.
they're so great. And what I was doing in that moment was I was creating um, new flavors and new mixtures. And so actually the one that you ended up getting was our CBN cookie. So it was a 25 milligram of CBN, 25 milligrams of CBD, and 5 milligrams of THC. And so those cookies at that time, um, I identify them as sleepy cookies.
Hmm.
And so what I'm doing there is I was creating an entourage of different cannabinoids that would help people get to sleep that didn't want to use things like um, melatonin.
Hmm.
Um, Melatonin can start to mess with your dreams after a little while, and it can be a little stressful on the body. So I wanted to give people an alternative. But I wanted to take it a step further because most cannabis people would just stop at making a gummy with these kinds of cannabinoids and call it good. But here I am for nourishment and wanting to educate and share about the plant magic. So the cookie itself is a honey almond cookie.
Hmm.
It is gluten free, grain free, all organic, and I call it vegan. So other than the honey, it's all vegan. And then what I went and did was I added um, lavender, lemon, and poppy seeds.
Hmm.
And so what I was doing there was playing with a variety of what are called terpenes.
Hmm.
They are taste and smell compounds that ultimately help kind of steer the ship that the CBD and the THC are propelling. And so what I did there was I involved different smells and taste profiles that relax and calm the body. The lemon has its own, the lavender has its own, the poppy seed in its own right has a little bit of microscopic opium.
Hmm.
The honey has a terpene profile, and the almonds have a terpene profile, to where when they all mix together, it basically was like a very strong, yummy, delightful, but something like experience that you could fight off if you wanted to be that grumpy little kid that was like, no, I'm not going to go to bed. I'm going to stay up and watch videos. Or you could just like let it take you to sleep and get some really nice, restful experience. And I was fortunate enough to have a customer, um, a client about the same time that you got those cookies that was tracking their sleep through a digital watch, and they would report that whenever they would consume the cookie, that they would get a 15% deeper sleep. Um, and so they it just kind of validated the general consensus that these cookies really do help. So the reason why there was not a very strong psychoactive experience was because that ratio really allowed for more of that health and wellness supplemental type of experience to be happening rather than particularly having a psychoactive
Yeah.
experience, which is where honestly the industry has kind of taken a fall, and they haven't really been promoting very very balanced ratios of these different compounds. Most people just want to promote a lot of THC, and that's where all these questions come from. That's where people feel like they can get introduced to cannabis. However, people like yourself and the thousands of others that I've gotten to help like around the country um, get exposed to cannabis through a balanced, very high quality CBD product, and it revolutionizes entirely their experience.
Yeah, I mean, the plants are the medicine, right? And I'm not drawn to THC in general, and so CBD wasn't that interesting for a while. I tried it. We had the nice long conversation. I learned something. So yes, CBD is interesting to me. For fun, when I was in Oregon or Washington, I can't remember. I went to like one of the because they have THC, shops everywhere, and they talk about indica and sativa. Is that words being used for THC, or does that apply to CBD, or what do those words mean?
Ha, those are my least favorite words
Oh, goody.
uh, because they're super confusing. People have been unfortunately totally led astray by the identification of like indica is going to put you into couch and sativa is going to whatever they say sativa is going to do. Um, no, so those words particularly designate whether there is a broadleaf or a skinny leaf on the plant.
Okay.
It determines a little bit about the growing nature of the plant, but those words literally have nothing to do with the effect that's going to come from cannabis at all. Zero. Absolutely. Like, literally, I tell everybody just forget those words because you're not talking about the growing nature of the plant. You're literally you're trying to identify the experience that's going to come from the plant. And so
Putting on their packaging of this percentage sativa, this percentage indica, are they literally saying this percentage of the fat leaf and the skinny leaf, or are they just getting it mixed up with the CBD THC ratio?
it's literally marketing. It's
Okay.
literally it's so intriguing. So um, those numbers can sometimes identify how much of the genetics of a fat leaf plant and a skinny leaf plant is in that particular product. Yep, totally. Um, however, most of those genetics are not exactly known, and unless those people were growing it themselves, like it's oftentimes very misleading. Ultimately, what's important to recognize is when you are looking at a hemp or cannabis marijuana product, um, they're going to tell you certain things on the packaging, and you can use some of that to understand what you might be experiencing. One of those is it's going to tell you some ratios. It's going to tell you some percentages. So we'll say it'll say 23% delta 9 THC. Um, say it's a very balanced flower. So we're going to say it has 23% CBD as well.
Okay.
And so, what you can recognize from just that particular ratio, which is called a 1 to 1, meaning it's the same on each side of it, you're going to recognize that you're not going to have an extremely strong psychoactive experience, um, but it's going to be the overall experience is going to be relatively potent. That's a relatively good ratio. You're going to find a lot of balance. You're going to find a lot of calm. Like you're not going to start seeing a lot of things. You're not going to. It's going to be very gentle. What I identify as medicinal, very good. If you are working with a really good product, say a flour or even like our cookies, um, they'll start to talk about the terpene profile.
Okay.
If you get if you get access to the terpene profile, that's really where you're going to start to be able to understand what's about to happen. If you smell a more fruity, bright smelling experience, something that's very pine sol, things of that sort, those are going to be more activating. If you smell things that are a little bit more um, gassy, deep, heavy smells, those are going to be a little bit more what I call, instead of indica, I call them sedating. Because really that's what we're ultimately looking for. We're looking, is this going to pick me up or is this going to put me down like one way or the other, or is it going to keep me somewhere in the middle? That's typically what most places are trying to say. Well, this is a sativa and this is an indica, but if you just go by those terminologies, there are indica plants, indica fat leaf plants, hella fat leaf plants that are totally activating. And there are sativa plants, skinny leaf plants that are totally sedating.
Hmm.
So just relying on those particular words, it's a little misleading. So really it's recognizing what is the ratio of CBD to THC. Does that have more THC? You're probably going to have a more psychoactive experience. Does that have more CBD? You're going to feel a lot more in your body, a lot more present, a lot more like a supplement.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then you look at the terpene profile, and there's a lot of them. There's a whole bunch of them. One can think of it most similarly to aromatherapy.
Okay, I was gonna say wine
So
tasting or something.
yeah, well, like when we start to think about it, like aromatherapy, like people
Mhm.
sell essential oils, right? And
Yeah,
you'll
they do.
see people with kits of oils that they use for all kinds of things. Well,
Terpene.
essential oils are basically concentrated terpenes.
Okay, so terpene is that root of no matter if you're talking coffee or wine or essential oils or cannabis, it's the
It's
aromatherapy.
yep,
Like it's
it's the building block. It's what makes it, give it a taste. It gives it a smell,
yeah.
and sure enough, that has its own effect. Like the aromatics that come from coffee
Mhm.
are like chemically designed to wake you up.
Hmm.
Yeah, lavender, same thing. You smell a bunch of lavender, and it's chemically designed naturally to calm you down and be an anxiolytic and relax your anxiety.
It almost
Um,
reminds me of like forest bathing or the silvotherapy. There's actually like forest bathing therapy, and it's related to what the plants are putting off. The type of plants that you're hiking in have something to do with your experience. Yeah, very cool.
that's the same. And so it's super cool. So, really when we're thinking about creating food and medicine and that interaction between them, if we are aware of what kind of terpene profiles it is that we're working with, we can really bring forth even more medicine.
Well, let's shift a little bit to cacao because I know direct farmer, we're talking about your family or whatever you call them in Peru where you get your cacao from. So let's shift to cacao, the medicinals of it, why do you love it, and the story that part of your journey.
Well, funny thing about cacao is that it's actually structurally very similar to cannabis.
Really?
And I got involved in cacao back in 2016, which was not long after I had gotten involved in cannabis. And over the years, it was very early in 2016 for cacao. Not a lot of people knew what it was, but there were couple companies that were starting to promote it. When you consume really high quality cacao,
Hmm.
a lot of the same medicinal benefits that come from cannabis can actually be unlocked. Theobromine, when you consume it, which is the active compound in cacao, when you consume it, it actually interacts with our endocannabinoid system, or a um, central nervous system component of our bodies that receives cannabis really well.
Hmm.
Cacao actually activates that same system.
Hmm.
So, similar to the way that CBD would help relax the body and help the body heal in a variety of ways, cacao can actually do very similar things. And new research day by day is showing that it can do something else. It's been really fascinating to be keeping up with the like healing components of cacao and recognizing like, oh, this magical plant that like we've been shoving a bunch of sugar into and calling chocolate for so long
And
is
milk.
actually, yeah, and it's actually magical. This is actually like a really potent plant. And so for me, funny enough, I end up being super involved with two plants that are working on the same system in one way or another. Cacao is awesome, and we've been working with this beautiful plant and these beautiful this one beautiful cooperative and this one beautiful producer in the San Martin region of Peru.
When you were in Peru for your studies, what did you learn about it indigenous wise?
You know, funny enough, they don't talk about it a lot.
Okay.
Um, yeah, even though Peru is one of the larger producing countries in South America for cacao, you don't really hear about it much. Um,
I've heard it
one
called
of,
food of the gods. And then
yeah,
like I
yeah.
have ape blends that have cacao, and then in San Pedro, it's a heart opener similar to San Pedro, and I've seen it used in San Pedro ceremony. So did you see it and they just didn't talk about it, or was it just not really around? It's very
It,
expensive too, I imagine. Maybe that could be part of why.
it can be a decent price tag, depending on who you're buying it from. There's always a foreigner tax, so that's always present. But what was intriguing was after I got cacao and was walking around with it in both paste form and bean form, and I was sharing it with many of Peruvians, and uh
Didn't like it?
uh no,
Oh,
at all. But there's like this really great like Nestle product there, like great, it's tasty. Um, and I would be like, well, what about this? And they're like, yeah, I would totally take that, like 100% all day, all day. And I was incredibly surprised because I'm like, yo, this is a superfood from your own land that you don't like at all. And they're like, no, we don't like it at all, like at all.
so
And
interesting.
so
Because it's
that was a
ceremonial
very,
grade. Like over
yeah.
here, it's become this like ceremony we do, and where'd that come from?
So Mexico is much more relevant for like the historical, like indigenous uses of cacao. I mean, cacao has definitely been used by many of indigenous folks. I mean, the Incas and um, many of the societies that they ended up conquering were all in some way or another using cacao. There's actually some new research about like how actually accessible it was to the average.
Do you have air in
Um,
your room?
it's my dog. So yeah, in Mexico, it's a much more relevant experience. The Aztecs, they call it the food of the gods, and but they're actually recognizing that this was actually a product that was much more accessible to the everyday person. So not just the royal figures were consuming cacao, but actually a wide breadth of society actually had access to this plant. It was used very medicinally, very intentionously. However, it was just an average. It was an average everyday experience for some. Um, when I arrived in Mexico, in Oaxaca, that's really where I started to see more presence around like indigenous ceremonial use of cacao. Throughout Peru, you'll see a lot about coca. You'll see a lot about lots of plants, and is including cacao. But you'll see a lot more about all the other things. In Mexico, cacao was very present, very special, and so the cacao ceremony that we're all like in a conscious community sort of setting, considering and talking about and doing. Honestly, it's maybe somewhere in some way or another inspired indigenously around circling around medicine.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what it is. It's that instinctive calling to do such, um, but it's not really hella indigenous. It's definitely a slightly more new agey experience.
I think it was actually used as like a form of money too, or trade at least.
It is and has been and continues to be. It's a very very sacred plant, and obviously now we're cultivating, so it's a lot more prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the old school trees, like the criollo trees, like some of the ones that we harvest from, they're old trees and they don't produce a lot. Um, and when yeah, when it's a commodity like that, it's very 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 special.
Yeah. I look forward to getting mine. I have a big order coming. And so what we're going to close out, wrap up a little bit, but there's just a couple of things. Like, if there's one thing you want people to hear today or to take away from today on their healing journey, of all the things we've talked about, what's like one thing they can add sooner than later?
One of my biggest passions, that I spoke to initially, was that there is a very magical synergy between what we're consuming
Mm-hmm.
and what we're putting on our body.
Mm-hmm.
And our food, our medicine, and our textiles are all intricately related. And when we have an opportunity to make a small change, whether that be eat something that's a little bit better, wear something that's a little bit more plant based, we're doing ourselves work in all the different ways. It doesn't need necessarily to be like a whole lifestyle change, but choosing a cotton shirt over something that's polyester
Yeah.
is a really great choice. Choosing something that's a little bit healthier for you, whether that be organic or not, but just something that's a little bit healthier for you is great. And educating yourself about why it is that you want to make that choice. Um, AI makes it super easy now to just like very quickly get on your phone and ask ask a question.
Mm-hmm.
And so informing ourselves as to like why we want to do something, and that allows us to make those decisions as to like who we want to support with our money and support with our overall wellness journey. So it's little things. It doesn't take a lot. It's just educating yourself easily, making a better choice here and there whenever you can, and ultimately, like you're doing it, you're rocking it, and I totally support any way that you want to choose to grow. And if I can be a resource for you in any way, shape, or form, whether that be like super down to earth information or more on the scientific level, like I'm here. I'm
Yeah.
I'm a resource, and
So
if I
how do
could be of
people
help,
find you? And go ahead and spell out the name of, I think you might have spelled it earlier, but your website, the Om Gnomes, it has a different spelling.
yeah. So it is
Yeah.
OHMGNOMES.com.
Om Gnomes. And it seems like it's going under, you're getting a new website, or there's some sort of something going on, a
Yeah,
new update?
yeah, we are launching a brand new site after many years with a self-made experience. I partnered with a local designer named Kelsey, and am launching a brand new experience that's going to have interactive resources available on it, classes, meditations, as well as products. So overall, I'm aiming for it to be like a marketplace where I can basically take this food theater concept that I've created and expand it further online to support myself and other creators.
Amazing. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast today and imparting your knowledge. And there's a lot of us in Austin, so Senavida's, from Austin, but it's going to be a global community. So maybe someone in Peru will hear this and want to connect and maybe try some cacao and give it a new shot. But yeah, you're just a wealth of information. I'm grateful to have you as a friend, and I have yet to have a waffle. I still haven't had one of your. I know. Look at your face. I've had your cookies. I've had your drinks. I know. Look at your face still. I need to have one of your waffles.
Wow.
I know.
Wow. How have I not fed you a waffle yet?
I
That
don't know.
is
We've been at the same events, but I was working and you were, I don't know. It just didn't, it just hasn't
I'm
happened yet.
I am floored. Well, yes, let's make that a change. I'm actually playing around with the idea of starting my own little podcast
Oh,
where we actually sit together and eat some waffles and chat. So um, maybe I can have you on mine and we can exchange the favor.
that would be awesome. I would love to eat a waffle and do a podcast.
Yeah,
Let's
awesome,
make it.
cool. Okay, oh, it's
All
more
right.
thumbs up.
Yay. Thank you so much. And we'll be in touch, but hopefully some of the listeners will be in touch as well.
Many blessings. Thank you so much, everybody.
This has been A Call to Healing. I hope Miguel's wisdom of cannabis and the details of CBD and THC have been insightful. To learn more about his work, explore Om Nom superfoods, cacao, felt gnome hats, or connect directly, visit ohmgnomes.com, omgnomes.com. And you have been listening to A Call to Healing, which is supported by Senavida, helping practitioners spend more time in service and less time in the back office. I'm Melanie McDaniel, and thank you for being here.